Hello, in this lesson I'm going to talk about accessing data using the SQL procedure. Specifically, I'm going to touch on using the select statement, selecting columns in a table, creating new columns, sorting data, and validating a query. So first, what is Proc SQL? SQL stands for Structured Query Language, and it was a language developed separately of SAS, but SAS has a procedure to basically use that language. It's also known as SQL. It's an older terminology. So if anybody ever uses the term SQL, they're talking about SQL. These first two data steps are just to create some data sets to work with. And I'll get right into talking about the select statement. So if I use the asterisk, I'm talking about selecting all columns. The columns are the same as the variables. It's just a different terminology when you're using SQL. From the data set A. So this will select all columns from data set A. And you'll notice over here in the output window, it just prints all the data in A. So what I can also do is, if I want to just select a certain column, I can select a few columns separated by a comma, and that will select just the columns that I specify. Now that creates just a printed screen. If I wanted to create a table, I could also type create table. Now again, the name, what the name things are called is different in SQL. So what SQL refers to as a table would be a SAS data step. The columns of variables. And there's a few other things that might come to mind later. So if I put create table, C would be the name of the table, and then as, if I put that before the select statement, then rather than getting a printout on the screen, I get a data set with that information in it. And I'll talk about that maybe later in another video. So let me add another variable in the column salary, and the next thing to talk about is creating new columns. So to create a new column, a lot of times you can calculate a column using another column. So if I took salary divided by 4, and I'm going to name this quarterly, so the salaries mentioned there might be for the whole year. If I divide it by 4, it might be what they make in a quarter of a year. When I run this statement, I get the columns I started with in dataset A, ID, sex, and salary, and another column quarterly. So that's a little bit on creating new columns. There's with that select statement, from starting with the word select to the semicolon, that's one statement, and it's often separated by several clauses, is what they call it in SQL. You have a few things that might be in that select statement. So starting with select from, where, group by, having, order by. These are all separate clauses that could be inside your select statement. The thing that's important to know about the select statement is the order in which you use these keywords to start the clauses matters. So you want to keep them in this order. Starting with select, you're going to have from, where, group by, having, and order by. Obviously, you don't necessarily need every single one of these clauses, but if you do have them, they have to be in that order. So So I quickly looked up a monogram to remember the order, and a good one I see is sweaty feet will give horrible odors. Sweaty feet will give horrible odors. So starting with S, the F, feet, will, and so on. Proc SQL can do a lot of things that other steps in SAS might do, like the data step. You can have a Proc SQL step that does the same thing or a similar thing, or a print statement or proc means. And one thing it can do is it can actually sort the data just like a proc sort. So you can sort of put in two steps in one, doing the data step and sort step in one. So down here I got sort procedure, and then we just put it out into a different I should add descending first. So let me put it out into a separate data set, just so it's sorted that way. In order to sort it in SQL, I'm going to use order by. This is going to show up in the output screen, but it will show you can use this order by like in creating a data step when you use create table. So I have here salary starting from smallest to the largest. One thing that's different here than in the sort step is the keyword to sort it by descending. It's not descending, it is DESC. But if I put descending, and let me clear out the output window in the log so we can see, it actually still works. I start with the highest salary here and it goes down. So one thing about the SQL procedure is perhaps it can do some things that in SAS that it might not be able to do outside of SAS when using a different program to run SQL. The last thing I want to talk about is validating a query. So there's two things you could use to validate a query. One of them is at the top of the step. You can use the keyword no_x, and this will not run the procedure, but it will print any error messages if you made a mistake. So this is a good way to test if you have a large data set, whether there's an error that would come up when you run it, rather than open up the or run the program and have it take a long time before you can stop it, or have to try to stop it up here by doing a break, which could take a minute or so. Another thing you could use is in the select statement, you can put a keyword before select, which is validate. And what validate will do is pretty much a similar thing, except for it's only for a select statement. So when you start talking about more intricate SQL procedures, you could have two select statements, in which case if I put validate on one of them and not the other, validate is only going to check this one select statement and not the second one. So that's just a brief overview of the Proc SQL. In later videos I'll go more into detail. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, any questions about anything in this video, be sure to write them below.